Sloppy Spoilers with your host, DT2. What's up, y'all? DT2 Comics Chat here, coming at you with another episode of Sloppy Spoilers. We're continuing our review of the Riddick series. Today we're going to be reviewing the third feature film entitled, shocker, Riddick. And you won't believe what some of us have to say. By some of us, I mean me. All right, let me bring our co-hosts on. Welcome to David Nemesis Howard.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am looking forward to talking this movie, but I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. I will say right off the bat, I think this is my favorite Riddick movie, but I do have my reasons, and I know some people are going to disagree with me, so I'm looking forward to getting into it. It's going to be a good discussion.
Welcome to Steve, Shadewing Sellers.
Oh, hi. I don't know. With this particular movie, I'm sort of in the middle with the two of you. I think that this was the weakest of the three Riddick films. It's very much like Pitch Black, the Apology is what I like to call it. It seems to be structured in that sense. But I don't hate it. I mean, there's a lot to like about it. So I think it should be fun to talk about how wildly different our opinions seem to be on this one.
Welcome to Jeff, Dr. Fate Bracey.
Normally, I'd say getting wet is a good thing, but not in this case. Yeah, I'm kind of up here with Steve. I feel like this is the weakest movie in the series because it feels mostly like a rehash, but it does give me enough interesting stuff in the first half of the film that I still like it. I don't hate it or anything like that, so I'm a little in the middle. It's not the best, but it's not the worst, and given that this series is not bad at all, I'm still in.
Okay, well, kick it off with our general impressions, and I'll give you mine, then I'm going to throw it out to my co-hosts. Y'all know me. Y'all know I tend to be kind of extreme. So, I'm not like the middle ground person. You have to work really hard to get me like in the middle of anything. And I don't understand why people like this film. Lord have mercy. I can't even sit through the first 20 minutes of this film. I don't understand what it's trying to add to the mythos, that monochrome kind of bronze, kind of neutral color that permeates everything. The resetting of a character that we already saw in a certain light. It's the same thing that did to Morpheus in Revolutions, and that didn't make any sense to me. The only one thing I did like about this film was the dog. The dog, sorry, okay, I liked him because I'm a dog lover. I'm like, okay, you're a good boy. I got you. That's the only thing I liked about this movie. And I don't understand why people like it. It gets on my nerves. I can't even get past the first 20 minutes because it's redundant. It's unnecessary. It doesn't give me a whole lot of new information. But part of my problem, because remember, I always like to admit my bias. Part of my problem is that Chronicles of Riddick did this to my brain. So this movie does this, and that is not. It's the same type of mistake. Well, same type of choice. Some think it's a mistake, some think it's not. That they made with Ripley in the Alien series. It was they work better alone. They need to be alone. We need to go back to the scary man against beast kind of thing. That's good, but that's a regression. You have to have a reason in the third installment of a film to take that approach. And just we want to see some more cool action scenes and we want to ratchet up the gore is not a reason for me. So I'm just like, okay, all right, well, we got to review it. But I never watched this film. Never, ever, ever. Okay? Because there's, besides the dog, I'm like, no, I don't want to see him disconstructed. I don't want to see him talking about how he missed a step. I want to see him have to get his edge back because that is character regression based on what we've already seen. What they established was a character that seemed to preternaturally, like Logan, have a strong sense of his environment, be able to anticipate things before they happen, be reacting to things that caught other people off guard, have a sense of when to move, when to zig, when to zag, when to fight, when to run. And now all of that goes away. So I'm going to say this and I'm going to throw it over to them. It's the same idea with evil Superman. You can change environments. You can even change somewhat motivations, but you can't change personalities. Whenever you change a personality, I am out. You just push me out of it. Okay, because I've been watching this one person, and now somebody that's supremely confident, someone that is the ultimate survivalist, someone that has gone face to face with creatures that bite the head off of everybody else that faces them. And now all of a sudden, I'm scrambling to make a campfire on Backwater Planet to find me some marshmallows, and I only survive because it's stupid. Nope. But that's just me. So I want to hear what my co-hosts have to say. Start with Nemesis. General impression.
Where do I go? I love you, DT, but I feel exactly the opposite about this movie.
I know you do.
I watch this movie all the time. I think that this movie is really in keeping with Riddick's character. I totally buy into the fact that this is what needed to happen, because at the end of Chronicles of Riddick, if we had gone forward with that without separating Riddick out, it becomes about the Necromonger and their quest and not Riddick's quest. So Riddick had to be separated from them. I also buy very much into the idea of the warrior being dulled in a society and letting his guard down, even a character like Riddick. So I bought all of that. I also love what this movie, see, yes, you're right that it did shrink the universe, but I like that because I think that it condensed everything that was good about Pitch Black and then added on to that mythos with the character of Papa John's and his crew and what was going on. I felt like after watching this movie, I had to go back and watch Pitch Black because I thought that it added 20 layers of complexity to John's, like Little John's, that weren't there before. I understood that John's character so much better after watching this movie, and I love that about this movie. It made me so happy because it illustrated to me once again exactly who John's was and why he became the shitbag that he was, because he hates himself because he can't live up to his father's standards, even to the point where he pretends that he's a good guy with the badge like his dad does, when most mercs are like Toombs. They're a bunch of freeloading, or Toombs or the other guy who has a box. I can never remember his name. I just call him Box Boy.
Santana.
Yeah, Santana. Most mercs are like those guys. They're not guys running around pretending like they're on the side of law and order. And so I understood John so much better after this because his dad, yeah, he's a merc, but he's a different kind of merc, and he sets a different standard. And once he failed to live up to his dad's standard, he became a self-hiding person. And it just makes me love Pitch Black that much more because of this movie. So
okay, here's the thing. Before I throw it to Steve, here's the thing. I would buy 98.7% of what you just said with one little tweak that changes the game. And here it is. If this movie was a prequel, if this movie happens before Pitch Black, then I'm with you. Okay. We see the making of Riddick. We see the making of Johns. We see mistakes made. We see toughening up, different survival modes. Then you send me into Pitch Black, I'm with you. But not as the third installment for a series. That's why it doesn't work for me. But with that one little tweak, then I'm on board with everything you said. Go ahead, Steve. General thoughts.
Yeah, I will also add that some of this is doing the work of the movie, and we just, we keep coming back to that. But I will say I really like the connection between Papa John's and Little John's for that reason. That's a really interesting idea.
Papa John's.
So again, my general
really
view.
calling him Papa John's.
Yeah, it's perfect. The thing of it is for me is that it really seems to me very obvious that these people were still reeling from the fact that Chronicles of Riddick was not received the way it should have been received. It was not a movie that was given the respect that it deserved, and it wasn't treated the way that it deserved. And I still do not, to this day, buy that this was the end game. I do not believe that David Twohy, when he wrote Chronicles of Riddick, said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take us back to another planet like Pitch Black, and we're going to have this thing going on this planet with Johns. No, I don't believe it. I don't buy it for 1 minute. Plans change somewhere along the line. Maybe probably in response to the reception of the movie. So, yeah, this was a change in plans. And this is one of the reasons why I kind of don't like it as much as I like the first two, because this one definitely feels like it was like, this is an apology for the last movie. We're going to go back to basics. We're going to make the movie that worked the first time, and we're going to go in that formula. But we're going to kind of like do it like in a slightly different way. And I mean, I can understand it from a business point of view, but from a creative point of view, I'm like, this is like the last place I wanted to go with this series. I want to know about Furyan. I want to know about all the stuff with the threshold and the transcendence and all of these other things that they were talking about. All these things that are hinted at in this movie, but we never see. That was what I wanted to see. And instead, it's like, okay, Riddick goes and lands on this planet, and okay, he's having to rebuild because he lost his edge. I mean, I don't think that's a terrible setup. I can understand, where they were going with that. I don't mind, taking the hero back to rebuild later. I mean, that's a perfectly satisfying arc, and it can be done well. Actually, the first Wolverine limited series does that. Like, he was absolutely beaten within an inch of his life by Shingen, and he had to rebuild himself into the samurai he wanted to be. That is an arc like that works. So I'm not in theory against the idea. I mean, the problem I have is that it's married. All this stuff is married to the Pitch Black formula that they felt like they needed to get back to. And this is kind of where it's a bit of a patchwork film in that respect, because you're taking like it as a sequel to Chronicles of Riddick with a little bit of the necromongery stuff. But most of the movie is instead the Pitch Black sequel with the Mercs. Now, there are redeeming things about it. There are things I enjoy about it. I mean, I certainly enjoy the bit with it. I love the dog. I like the idea that, okay, there are these two groups of Mercs that are not entirely in agreement with each other, and Riddick is kind of playing them against each other. And he's doing all these other different things. And then the whole relationship with Papa John's. And I really think that Papa John's is easily the most interesting of the Mercs that we saw. That relationship with him and Riddick, and the father redeeming the son. I really love that whole notion. The whole idea that, Papa John's doesn't want to believe what his son really was. He's in denial about this, and Riddick calls him on this. And then his test being, I have to go and, prove that I'm not the man that my son is, that he is the better man. That's interesting. All of that is interesting. But, the problem is it comes at the expense of the things you want to see, which is the necromongers, which is the transcendence, which is Furyan, which is all the big picture stuff. And we're having to wait another film, which we may hopefully get soon. But, we've been waiting years for this. We've had to wait years for this. And we still haven't gotten this. All we've gotten is a tantalizing taste of it. And on top of that, the good stuff that you want to see is all in the outtakes in the director's cut. So you have to watch the director's cut just to get morsels of what you really want to see. And that's it. What really kind of gets me about this movie. It's not a bad film in and of itself, but it just feels like a filler episode in the middle of what we really want to see, which we only got a tiny amount of. And it doesn't really whet the appetite that we got for all the stuff that was hinted at in the Chronicles of Riddick. And I think like that's really where I am with this movie. I want to like it, and there are things I like about it, and it's not terrible, but it's not what this film could have and should have been. And that's kind of where I am with it.
Well, I'll use the word there. Well, hold on. Let me just that, and then I'll throw it back to Nemesis and Bracy. Use the word there, formula. Here's the deal. It falls into the same problem that the MCU does. The MCU formula works when you keep moving the camera to a new character. If you look at the individual trilogy of films, however, they are wildly all over the place because each one of the first, except Captain America, wraps up the character's arc in the first movie. Thor learned what he needed to learn in the first movie. Tony learned what he needed to learn in the first movie, so they had to regress him and give him some other stuff. So the 3 solo movies are wildly inconsistent, and Hulk is the epitome of wild inconsistency. Because when you're going to go formula, it doesn't work with the same character. It works when you keep introducing a new character in the mix.
Yeah.
Exception being Captain America, because Captain America literally leveled up in every movie he was in. So he was still fun to watch. That's what I mean when I say, if they thought that was the deal here, then it works as a prequel. It works as Riddick begins. See what I mean?
Yeah.
But I agree with you completely that this was like the Luke and Leia kiss, because Luke and Leia weren't related in Empire. Then they said, oh, yeah, okay, well, yeah, they are. But then he tried to act like he always planned that. Yeah, no, you didn't. You just pivoted because his sister was supposed to be a character we hadn't met yet. So they just threw that out and made it Leia. So that's what happened here. I agree with you completely on that. That a whole lot of stuff, they just pivoted and like, well, we got to find something that works since Chronicles didn't blow up. Go ahead, Nemesis, and then Bracey.
Well, first of all, I will agree with Steve. I wanted to say that the last 20, 25 minutes of the movie is completely formulaic. It's pitch black too. I absolutely agree with that. All the monster stuff, I could have lived without. You could have cut all that out, and I would have been fine. Just with it being, a drama and stuff between him and the Mercs, and him hunting the Mercs and this Papa John stuff and all that. That was the best part of the movie. Everything else after that was pitch black 2 with some triple X thrown in, because he hadn't done enough seat presses in that movie riding on motorcycles. He had to get one in this movie. That said, I firmly believe, David Twohy and Vin Diesel have said that there are at least 2 more movies after Riddick, and maybe 3. I believe that in time, this movie will be vindicated when you see Lone Wolf Riddick again, not tethered to the Necromongers, go into the Underverse, find Vaco, avenge himself, find Furia, and then go back to Furia.
That's what we want to see. We want to see Vaco answer for what he does in this movie.
Yeah, but I think this movie was necessary to get to that movie. It's just taken us another 10 years to get the next movie that we wanted to see.
Yeah.
But we'll see if I'm proven right. So,
I hope you are.
Go ahead, Bracey. General thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm sure this obviously was not the grand plan. I'm much more in Steve's camp, and partly in yours, Nemesis, because I'm pretty all about this movie up until we get to the third act, when we get to the monsters, because then it is just pitch black 2, literally. But I also agree with DT that it does shrink things. Now, there is some building in here that I really like. But like Steve, this was not what I was hoping for. And it's the least satisfying for me overall out of a series of movies that I really enjoy. And I definitely understand where DT is coming from, because watching the film, I want the Underverse, I want Threshold, I want Transcendence, and Furia. And I thought they were actually going to go there. And they probably still could have, but I think Twohy has a much grander plan for that. And this film becomes tolerable because of how much Vin Diesel and David Twohy love this world and this character they've built. It's in every single frame, every scene, every line of dialogue. This is a real passion project, real labor of love. And sometimes that's enough to get you through a movie and still like it, even if it's flawed. What I had anticipated them doing is, according to the lore, the reason why Furyans are so tough is they kind of grew up like the Fremen or the Sardukar from the Dune series. These are peoples. One is indigenous to a very hostile planet. That was the Fremen from Dune, and then the Sardukar were they had a prison planet that the Shadow Emperor would send everybody to, and it was like living on a slam. It was a fight to survive, and if you ended up being enough of a badass, he was like, hey, you know what? I'll pull you into my armies here. Like, you'll have a much better life now that you've passed the crucible of surviving on this deadly world. And so I was kind of hoping that this was going to be Furia, and I expected Furia to be loaded with environmental dangers and loaded with dangerous animals. It's almost like the way they explain the origin of Doomsday. Krypton used to be the most dangerous planet in the system, and they dropped this thing down on it, and it just kept killing and killing and killing it until it evolved to a point where it could survive anything. And that's sort of how the Furians are. And I think you could have still done this movie in that context. I just feel like Twohy has a grander plan in mind for when we actually get to Furyan. So I abide by this film. I take it for what it is, but I do want to see so much more. And unfortunately, it was evident that they had to go back to a smaller budget. They had to scale back because they really did kind of bet the bank on Chronicles of Riddick. And much like Steven Nemesis, I did like seeing Riddick the Loner. We still give him a companion, so he's got a reason to talk and somebody to talk to, so we get his inner monologue expressed vocally as well as his literal voiceover monologue. And I did like seeing Riddick, like, what's Riddick's day like? How does he survive in a hostile world? These things that we'd never really seen Riddick on his own before. He's always the thing that gets things moving in these films. It was kind of nice to see a film that was like literally about him for a change. But at the same time, you just wanted so much more. And I actually like as much as I like having some hostile creatures in a pitch black movie, it was nice to have some of that, which I thought was fine for the first third of the film. I did want the rest of the film to be just about Riddick dealing with these two different groups of mercs, the type of mercs he's very used to dealing with, and the type of mercs who are more like actual peacekeepers, police officers kind of mercs, people like who are legitimate and have a badge and all that. And I like the conflict going on between these three groups. And once again, we see Riddick is not, he does not go out of his way to be this mass murderer that he's been painted at. And I do hope in time that we get into Riddick's past a little bit, because I want to understand why he is considered the most dangerous man in the universe, beyond his obvious physical and mental attributes. How did he get that? Like, what is the slaughter that pegged him as a monster when everything I see him doing has a certain code of ethics about it? And again, we get to see that play once again in this film. And as Nemesis likes to keep pointing out, he tests people. And you can kind of bank on their survivability depending on whether or not they pass or fail his test.
You want to see his Butcher of Blaviken moment, to borrow from The Witcher. So,
yeah, his berserker rage. Okay, well, keening on what Bracy says, I definitely see what you're saying, but this is kind of a Empire to Jedi challenge / problem, and that being, we have to be honest in saying that the reason we got the original trilogy that we did was because George Lucas didn't have total control like he wanted for a variety of different reasons, but there were other voices in the mix, which is really why we got the original trilogy. Because when we got the prequel trilogy, that had a uniform feel to it, but it had a lot more problems. And problems that we didn't really see resolved really until we get to The Mandalorian. But the point that I'm trying to make is, in terms of feeling like Star Wars, but the point I'm trying to make is, it's one of the easiest things in the world to do, which is, one of the best parts of being in our community. One of the easiest things in the world to do when you're a content creator is to lose sight of what people are really interested and exciting about, and then continually put the camera in the wrong place. Or, like you said, pitch black the apology, Steve. And so, based on what Bracey's saying, it's like you showed me a world out there that both entertained me and expanded me and gave me more information about your world. So I can't quite understand why this movie is not paying all of that off. Like Steve said, morsels, because it wasn't the payoff of that. It was almost a side journey, almost into interlude territory, because we can't forget about the world we've already inhabited. That's the thing. That's the thing. And so that's what I mean when I say, I understand what Nemesis is saying about where it's going with the character and all that, but
if you told me tomorrow that this was it, this was the final Riddick movie, I'd be pissed.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is absolutely true. I have always, having followed this series closely and read the stuff from David Twohy and Vin Diesel, I've always believed that there are more movies coming. And so that's why I feel the way I do about this movie. If this was the last movie ever and you told me this was it wouldn't be nearly as happy with this movie as I am.
And then they do 9 Fast and the Furious movies. And they keep announcing more of them. And it's because they're the cash cows. And then meanwhile, you have Riddick that has this deep, interesting world. And it's like, when are they going to get to the point?
Well, again, it feels very much like interlude territory to me. But, if it's another one of those things where it's also almost like a love letter to the character.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you view it from that lens, then you can get some satisfaction out of the film as well. But for me, I actually wanted to see more progression and not regression. And I wanted to see more reasons other than I needed to get my edge back. So I'm not saying that was wrong or bad. I'm just saying that just didn't do it for me. Just me. All right, that's a good segue into let's talk about our next little subject, which is the extended cast of characters, all these characters we've been talking about. The Dead Riddick team is led by Santana, and also David Twohy's on that team playing Diaz. And they do some nasty stuff on that team. And then the Take Riddick Alive team, we've got Hunter there and, all the John's drama. And then also Katie Sackhoff is there. And that's a whole nother, we'll get into that. But I want to hear your thoughts about the teams. My general thoughts about them were, I thought they were good, but I'm very visual, so I couldn't get past a lot of the browns and the monochrome and the uniformity of the background. I needed some contrast to visually keep me interested. So a lot of it felt like just a big old sand dune all the time, and where we're not fighting, we're not bleeding, we're just talking, and it just didn't work for me. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it didn't work for me. So it was a little harder for me to engage in the characters, number one. Number two, I already told you I like the dog the best. Number three, when I look at the Mercs, there was just a different movie playing in my head. I like the psychology of Riddick pitting them against each other. I like how he gets in your head, and it's really predatory in a sense. But what I didn't like was how can I say this? I felt like everybody in the mix should have been a little bit smarter than they were. And the reason I feel that is because none of this could possibly have been the first time for any of this. There's no one in this mix where this is the first time you've been in a situation like this. Not possible. And so kind of the way they responded in certain things, I was just kind of like, and I see that many times in writing and movies all the time. You do things because you want to have a scene, but you forget that unless you're doing year one, if you're doing experienced characters, they wouldn't react like that. And so that's when I said, even in when we spent all that time with Riddick or whatever, I was just like, you can't show me all that super cool Furyan stuff you did. And then now, all the water scorpion stuff is coming up and it looks like you're struggling. I get that you're hurt and everything, but you've been hurt before. And then you do the Batman sheet where you should have bled out, but you didn't. So anyway, that seemed kind of rambling, but my general thoughts on the characters were, I felt like it should have been a little bit smarter because this is nobody's first time at the rodeo. And I don't know, I would have come in with a net. I would have come in shooting. I would have come in and captured him from the sky. I would have come in with a whole bunch of stuff, and there wouldn't have been conversations. There wouldn't have been a whole lot of stuff. It would have just been a very quick operation.
To be fair, Toombs did try that the last movie.
Yeah, he did. He did.
And John does have reasons for wanting to talk to him. So I grant him that.
I get it. I get it. I'm just saying, I don't know. It's the same thing that the Flash does. He captures somebody, then he talks to them, gives them enough time to escape. So I don't know. I just think they should have been smarter. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but that's just me.
Oh, no, I have a similar criticism in one scene specifically.
Okay, well, I'll throw it to you. Let me hear your thoughts about the planet full of mercs.
Now, the merc crews were interesting, at least some of them. Was it Santino or Santiago?
Santana.
Santana.
Como va.
Santana.
Box Boy.
Santana. Yeah, Box Boy. He was the least interesting to me because he was a cardboard cutout character. He was just meant to be bad. He's all the bad things you don't like, and that actually made him kind of the most disappointing character out of the series for me, because the majority of these characters have something to them. Even when you look at Toombs, who's in sort of the same sort of light, even Riddick could appreciate the fact that Toombs was a survivor. But you get a Box Boy, and there's nothing redeeming about him. You find out that he's been letting himself and his crew take turns with their first captive. So already he's despicable. He's just a gross person. I don't understand why he's in charge. I don't know why somebody hasn't fragged this guy and taken over his operation. I don't get that. And but the rest of his crew, even though we don't get to know them for very long, they at least are somewhat interesting. Now, I get what you say about like the monochromatic palette. That doesn't bother me so much. I thought Pitch Black was largely monochromatic. You went from like this very bright sort of setting to a very dark sort of setting. Now, Riddick obviously gave us an explosion of color and texture and scenery, which was fantastic. And so I felt like this has its own feel. It's very much a Western, if you ask me, in terms of its organization and its palette. So I was okay with that. And I did like that they at least tried to do a few visually interesting things with people who are wearing kind of similar gear. For the dead mercs, the one guy gets kind of like the turban and the face cloth, and you got Bible Boy running around, and Box Boy, he's got his big old handkerchief and his long hair to set them apart. So at least they have like a little visual trick to set them apart. Although I don't know for the life of me why Bible Boy is with this crew. You're going to be in the Bible, and you're going to tell me you're okay with them raping your prisoner just because she's a criminal? Like, no, I'd have been like on one mission with those guys. Like, you know what? I think I need to sign on with another crew. This is not working for me. So
I don't know why he didn't try to go on to Johnson's crew. They would have been much better.
Yeah, for him. I mean, like he's really more in line with that kind of crew. At least they've got they're honorable and they're professional. And Box Boy's crew is anything but professional. They're just hard. They're just hardened men. Johnson's crew, they get separated by the fact that like even though they are wearing very similar things, and I like the little joke like I didn't know we were all supposed to be matchy. But you've got very recognizable people on that crew. You've got Katie Sackhoff. You got Budokin Woodbine. People are going to stand out. Genre actors who we know and love, and so that makes it very easier to tell these crew members apart, even though they're kind of decked out in the same kind of riot gear. But I have to agree, they should have been smarter. I'm okay with Box Boy not being so smart because he just never comes across as smart. Although I think some of his crew should have been like, oh man, we got a bum sensor. It's like, well, don't just one of you walk out there. How about like 5 of you walk out there to replace the sensor? Something like that. Like you don't expect he's going to be mucking with it somehow. You're relying too much on your technology. You're too into that. He's going to exploit that. But the scene that really got me, that made me question the intelligence of everybody, was the locker. You know, Boxboy admits the key never came off his neck. And he even makes the case like, are you telling me that he took the key off me, mucked with the locker, and put it back on me? Because they have this, for those of you who haven't seen, they've got an explosive panel on this locker where they've stashed the power cells for their ship so Rick can't just steal a ship. And when I saw the note on there talking about like fair trade, and I was like, this dude's a master of psychological warfare. He wants you to open up that locker. And what do? They open up the locker, even like the professional, very experienced mercs led by John. I was like, why are you guys buying into this? But there's the whole drama of whether or not Boxboy is going to explode that kind of like got everybody to turn off their brain. And I was like, it's just a matter of time. You've opened up the locker. You never locked it back up. You never took the key. You left it wide open. You know he's been in there once already. He's written in blood across the place. And you left that locker unguarded. And guess what? He's got your stuff now. I did have an issue with them being that stupid.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and like then that was the scene that like got me. I thought a lot of the other things they were doing were pretty smart. I liked from a military tactical standpoint. I like the way Johns had Dahl backing him up, sniping. That they had all kinds of interesting different rounds and sensors and devices used. You know, they had their big cattle prods to try and catch him alive. They had trank rounds. They had barium rounds for tracking the radioactive element in there. You know, I like the chemical pheromone sensors. Like, oh, I'm picking up human pheromones. Like, that stuff was cool. I wish, and that is one thing I like about the series, like seeing all these new levels of technology and looking back at like the Necromongers is like, how did their society develop so much more beyond everybody else's? And it makes me, again, it's another tease because now I want to get back into these other cultures. Like, what kind of stuff do the elementals have? If the Necromongers have this level of technology, because you look at the Mercs guys, they're using pretty much standard weapons. You know, they're using high velocity impact projectile bullets out of machine gun. You know, Buddha King Woodbine pulls something out that looks basically like a Glock. And meanwhile, the Necromongers, you know, they got their gravity guns and their gravity systems. And like the coolest technology the Merc has is stuff that we probably have at DARPA right now. So that's fascinating. And again, a tease is something else I want to see. I appreciate seeing more, but it just gives me a hunger for stuff that wasn't in this film eventually.
Well, I wouldn't have had the Necromongers in the film at all because it harkens too much back to what we saw before. I would have had him just explain what happened and then just go straight into this film. In terms of the level of weapons tech, that's cool. But remember, when he sets the beacon off, there's a readout that says who he is, obviously, and then they come running. That's what I mean when I say, wouldn't you prep for a mission like that? For the most notorious killer or someone crazy or someone you've been looking for or whatever you want to say.
Well, that seems to be the problem. Everybody who comes after Rick seems to think they've got exactly what they need to take him down, and they're always wrong. And I would not have just done the Necromonger thing with exposition as much as it made me want to see a different movie. I think exposition I'd have felt like even more cheated.
Well, if it's your first time coming up against Riddick, then I'll give you that. But if you know anything about him, all the stuff we saw him do, because remember, he's done way more stuff than we saw in the first two films.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We've seen it. Most people who've seen it in his universe
are dead.
Don't get to tell people. Don't forget when they're out on patrol and they're like, hey, man, he's just one guy. Like, 5 was already too many. Now we got 11 for just one guy. So a lot of people just don't believe the hype, I'm thinking.
If you have to keep sending guys because everybody come back dead, might be something there to believe. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Go ahead, Steve. Thoughts on the Mercs?
Yeah, I will add one thing to this last point, and that is nobody seems to react to the ending of Chronicles of Riddick. None of these characters in universe seem to understand. Like, they always treat him like, okay, he's the same convict and the same murderer that we saw in Pitch Black. Oh, we're just going after this guy who went in onto this planet and he killed these guys. It's like, no. You are after the guy who killed the Lord Marshal.
Yes.
You are the guy that killed the Holy Half-Dead and ran the Necromongers. Why is nobody pointing this out? I couldn't get past that. Like they want so much to bury Chronicles of Riddick in this story that the characters are not even acknowledging things that they should be acknowledging. He's a public figure. He was a head of state. How do you not mention that? So yeah, this is plot-induced stupidity, because the story wants us to forget things, and they think that the characters should forget them too. And that was one of the things that really irritated me throughout the whole movie. The mercs keep getting dumber and dumber. Little John's was pretty competent. And then we get Toombs, who is kind of stupid, but, semi not that bad. Okay, and now we get the Santana, who is not only stupid, but just evil, and evil in a way that is not even pro-survival. Yeah. I mean, this guy asked for it, and I will say, the only reason that this character was not killed sooner is because of he had to survive for the plot, so we could have that cool ending in the middle, where Riddick puts him in the box. There were several points in this entire film where the other mercs should have killed him, or done something like, okay, well, maybe we have a rule with the mercs where merc shall not slay merc. Okay, maybe that should have been established, actually, but okay, let's kind of run, and basically do a little bit of the work of the movie for the sake of discussion. Okay, let's say there is such a rule. That didn't mean that they couldn't send him out to be bait. I would have sent him out for Riddick to kill him.
But we didn't kill him.
Yeah, let Riddick do that. I mean, that's exactly what Little John's was prepared to do, to Jack. It's like that didn't seem to be against their rules somehow. So why not do that to Santana? I mean, he definitely wants it. Then he killed the dog, for example. He saw them kill the prisoner. Why wouldn't Riddick want to take him down? Why not set him out there, and use him as bait? Any of a number of things that they could have done. But either way, Santana should have been dead from day one. I'm surprised Batista didn't try to kill him to take over. It seems like the only reason anybody was not killing him was because they were scared of him, or maybe they felt that they weren't smart enough and he was trickier, or some other reason. But I mean, this guy was so dumb and so brutal that I can't understand why anybody would be loyal to him for 5 minutes. I mean, it's like the Joker. In terms of how does the Joker maintain the loyalty of his thugs? I have no idea. Because he's the villain and he has to be there for a certain length of time until he's taken down, and that's it. So I had a problem with that automatically. There were cool things. I liked, Riddick, with the psychological warfare stuff with the box. I think that they were stupid to leave the door open and let him take the stuff. But I could even buy the whole business of, okay, maybe they took the key from the neck. Is Riddick that good? Well, probably. We've seen him sneak stuff off, very, very very, very sneakily. I mean, he's very good at that kind of stuff. And is this guy smart? No. I mean, I could definitely see this guy being distracted by something, like maybe, looking at Sadie Sackhoff, and having Riddick just come along, sneak the thing off and put it back. It's within the realm of possibility for Riddick to do this. So, I mean, I didn't necessarily have a problem with him potentially doing that, but I do like the psychological warfare angle of it. The problem where it got stupid was that they left the thing open with the nodes there. That was where it got stupid. Up to that point, I was like, okay, is he or isn't? Did he or didn't he? All right, that's interesting. I don't have a problem with that. The various mercs individually, they seem to be very one note for the most part. They seem to have one major personality trait for the most part. So you get Luna, who's the guy I'm all about my mother and my faith, and you have this other guy who's the big thug, Batista, and you have all these other characters that just basically be about one thing, and they're not as good as the characters that we saw in Pitch Black. like with all the characters that we saw in Pitch Black, we got enough time where, except for the red shirts, we got to know them reasonably well. We got to know Jack a little bit. We got to know the Imam decently well. We got to know Fry decently well, and we got to know Johns decently well. The only character that seems to have that level of depth in this movie is Papa John's. Maybe Doll to a lesser extent, but beyond, it seemed like for the most part it was, yeah, I'm a sniper and I'm a lesbian, but I have a thing for Riddick, kinda. Okay, I guess. And then just so yeah. I mean, it's not that these were bad. I mean, but you kind of know that they're red shirts. You know that Riddick or the monsters are going to take him down one by one. You're not particularly attached to most of them. The one you really care about is Papa John's because he has depth and because we care about his relationship to Little John's and how that motivates his relationship with Riddick now. Okay, that's interesting. But everybody else, it's just like, okay, wait for them to die. And, if, we're missing a few along the way, okay, great. I don't care.
All right, let me hit a few points there before I throw it to Nemesis. Number one, that was a very interesting question. How does he maintain loyalty? How does the Joker maintain loyalty? Because if you're stupid enough to deal with the Joker, you even get anywhere in a circle on his radar, anywhere near him, the possibility of you dying horribly is going to hang over your head from that moment forward. So kind of like if you cross him, even if you waited 2 years, you're going to laugh yourself to death at some point. You're going to die horribly if you cross this clown.
I would rather cross him and risk dying than know I'm going to be killed by him later.
There's actually a Joker story, a Joker comic book. I think it's called My Friend Jack or something like that. It's about a henchman who thinks he's like Joker's best friend until Joker eventually kills him. Something like that. It's pretty good.
What happened in Batman '89, he killed his best friend. But I'm saying,
good old Bob.
Right, Bob. But I guess what I'm saying there, Steve, is that it would get in most people's head.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying, number one. Number two, there's a whole Negan thing. Because I asked the same question about Negan. Walking Dead, and I'm like, well, if you start with a couple of really loyal dudes to begin with that will put their bodies between you and danger and people can't get to you, if it's never a one-on-one fight, after a while, people would get tired and just go with it. So maybe there's that angle as well. With Santana and all that, you've got to show me a reason. You got to show me a reason that they wouldn't just kill you and take over. You got to show me more of a reason than what I've seen.
Right.
So, if you can successfully get in people's heads, that can go a long way. That might not go all the way, but that can go a long way if you do that successfully. But you have to know what you're doing.
And I don't buy that he would be able to do that to Johns or people like that.
Unfortunately, we never had enough time with the characters because we had that kind of prologue of Riddick being by himself. And there's nothing to indicate that nobody on his crew, except maybe Luna, because he's the young buck, couldn't be doing Box Boy's job.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, in all three cases, although not so much Negan, but in the case of the Joker, and in this case maybe the Mercs and the Bounty Hunters across the galaxy, there's that network thing. There's that thing that we got to see a little bit more in the Bourne movies, where they have operatives, or they call them assets, where they activated them. And so no matter where Jason was in the world, there was an assassin close enough to him to activate and come, take him out, or do whatever. So what if you get involved with any one of these bad guys and you get a bigger picture of a network? Because the natural thought for me to be, well, just get off planet or just get out of the system and maybe you can go have another life, which would be cool. But how do you know you're not dealing with someone that has operatives every place humanoids are? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But if they make you think they do, you know what I'm saying? So it can be done. I'm just saying you gotta, it's like they say, if you want to frighten all the coyotes, kill 3 of them, then hang their dead bodies outside your house. So once they see the corpses of them 3 coyotes, the rest of the coyotes won't say, hey, there's 50 of us. We can take them. The rest of the coyotes would be like, I don't know. I don't know. I see, Alvin, Simon, and Theodore up there, and they kind of gone, so I don't know. I don't know about that. Kind of like that. People tend to be more like that than not. The four of us are crazy enough to challenge that house with the dead coyotes, but that, everybody not going to do that. Okay, go ahead, Nemesis. What do you think?
All right. I'm going to defend a lot of this stuff. Although I do agree with
I
some
feel
of
the
it.
pushback coming. I see the pushback powers activate. Shape of Nemesis.
Let's start with the unprofessional crew, the crew that wanted to kill Riddick. First of all, I think these guys are that stupid. These guys are. I mean, if Johns was a fallen, a flawed man, and Toombs was a brute, these guys are thugs and criminals, one step from being on the other side of the line and being hunted by mercs themselves. They are not professionals. They're not particularly smart, and they operate on bully tactics, fear, and brute force. And Santana, as the one who is the trickiest tricky of the brutes, of the thugs, is the one who has landed himself somehow in charge of this group. I think there's something else going on here, but this may be me reading too much into the movie. I got a distinct flavor of La Familia from this group. Having grown up around a lot of those people, having seen a lot of gangs with those type of people in them, they are loyal to each other right up until the moment that they're not loyal to each other. If that doesn't make sense, is that the loyalty and the people that lead the crew, they're only loyal until it's not useful anymore. And I think that's perfectly encapsulated by Batista's Diaz when he was willing to just screw everybody over and take one node for himself and get a ship and get the hell off the planet. And I don't think he was taking anybody with him. That said, I lost my train of thought for a minute. With Batista, that character, and the other characters on there. Real quick, just to go through them. The two guys that died early, the red shirts, and then the third guy. I mean, they really were red shirts. I did get a sense of feel that they were, part of that same Latin crew, that La Familia. They definitely had that feel to them. I think that they were like from the same planet or something like that. Once again, I'm kind of doing the work of the movie for it, though. I will admit that. The Luna character, I think DT hit on it right there, which is that, yeah, he doesn't belong with this crew, but I think he took his chance to get off a world somewhere. And then it's like, what happens when you leave? What world are you left on? And are you ever going to get off that world? I mean, that is a problem. Yeah. And you're stuck. And unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about how easy it is to travel from world to world, how much it costs, a whole host of things.
Yeah. Let me do the work of the movie and take it a little bit of a step further. I would not be surprised if there had been another captain before Santana. And I would not be surprised if Santana had killed him to get control. Because I don't think that Santana's the kind of guy who would have brought a crew together of any kind. I really don't.
I mean, it could be a host of things. It could be as simple as he's the only guy who knows how to run the system to get some food. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's like there are so many things that we don't know that can lead to a guy staying in power. So I don't think that's untenable. As far as Jeff's situation with the stupidity of them taking off the lock, I agree completely. The only thing I will say is that Riddick is doing a mind, and I'm not going to say the word, a mind F on these guys.
Right.
Yeah.
And after a while, it starts to get in your head, and I think the problem that a lot of us are having here is that we are dealing with perfect knowledge when the people in the movie have imperfect knowledge. Riddick is a myth, and oftentimes in that world of criminals and mercs and everything else, myth is usually a bunch of BS. If you said that you caught a fish 3 feet long, it was 6 inches long, and so nobody is going to believe this crap from Riddick. And most of the people who are telling the stories, you're sitting there, you're in a bar, and some guy is getting rounds of drinks bottom for him, and he's telling stories about Riddick, and everyone's like, yeah, that guy's full of crap, you know? And those are the few people that are even telling stories. Who knows what's in the official records, you know? So that is not out of the realm of possibility. But these guys get on World, and suddenly, in the middle of the night, 2 dudes just disappear. They're just gone. They're dead. And a third guy got chopped in half by some huge ass predator traps. Suddenly you're like, who the hell are we on this planet with? Now, any sane person at that point would be like, you know what, maybe the money's not worth it. Let's get the hell out of here. You know, Riddick can stay here as far as I'm concerned.
They actually do bring that up. To be fair.
Luna. Yeah, Luna is like, let's go.
He was the smart one.
Yeah, these guys are thugs, you know, and then Johns has his own thing. And, you know, Santana is a thug. And so they stay. Now, opening it up, all right, I can see opening up and changing it. Not locking it back up again, that's stupid. That is just plain stupidity. And the only reason I could see Santana not locking up again is because he's genuinely scared that Riddick might get the key and change the code, and then he's going to blow himself up. You know, that's the only reason I could see for Santana not locking it again. Other than that, that's just plain dumb. But I agree with you that they are fairly one-dimensional. Santana is the kind of character that when he died, there was no tears shed. You know, as
I was cheering when he died. I was hoping he would die sooner.
Yeah, as Shadewing said, you know, I was hoping you were going to say this line, so I'll say it for you. Shadewing put on our personal chat. He's like, you know, if ever there was a character asking to die, it's this guy. And it's like, absolutely. You know, Santana was just begging to die through the whole movie. Batista's character, the problem I have, and this is going to be a legitimate criticism of the movie, all of these characters could have been built on even further. You could have had Batista be the big bad and have a showdown between Batista, Johns, and Riddick instead of having the monsters, and the movie would have been great.
Yeah.
You could have cut the monsters out of this movie completely and just have Riddick wanting to get off this planet once he healed, and have it be a psychological thriller between these two merc groups and Riddick, and then the bad is Batista. When Santana dies, Batista sees his chance, and he becomes the evil SOB that he is. That would have been an awesome movie. You know, so the monsters were not necessary. Mm-hmm. Let's get to Johns' crew. The 2 guys, the Billy wannabe from Predator, you know, he was okay. I would have liked to have seen more from him. I would have liked to see him actually do some tracking stuff more than what he did.
Yeah.
The other character, who I swear to God looks like Tracy Morgan. I still think that's Tracy Morgan. They just put another name on there. You know, same thing. Although I thought that his character had some real potential because I saw him have a wet his pants moment when he realized just how deadly Riddick is when Riddick caught him and held a knife to his throat. And I wish they had done more with that, because here is a character who is professional, I think, who is good at his job, and he just realized that no matter how good his job he is, Riddick is 10 times better than he is, you know? And I thought that was interesting. Dahl, I don't know. Are we going to discuss Dahl at another time?
Well, you can go ahead since we're here. There's some very interesting things to say about her.
Let's just start with the name because it's right there.
Yeah. I mean, it was like Baby Doll. She's there to be looked at. Then they give us her titty for no reason at all. I'm like, what? You know, I'm not above looking at some breasts when I want to, but like, was there a reason that Katie Sackhoff's, you know, left breast needed to be exposed for this movie? I don't think so.
Truckload of money.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I guess. And I agree. Her character was very one-dimensional. And the fact that she was a lesbian, it was not shocking at all. It was so cliche as to be unshocking. It's like, oh, look, the tough guy soldier girl is a lesbian who is going to somehow be attracted so much to the bad boy that now she wants the bad boy to go balls deep into her. Oh, yeah, okay. You know, it's like I've seen this movie about 500 times.
Did she get unlesbian? That's all I want to know.
No, only for Riddick. Only for Riddick.
That's right. Only for the alpha male.
Because Riddick is like so hyper masculine that he's the one to do this. Yes.
Yeah. He didn't cure her. He only scratched an itch. That's all I'm gonna say. So, and then Johns. And I agree with you that Johns is the most interesting character. I could have had another 20 minutes of Johns and Riddick, so I think it was that good and had that much potential. So the last thing I'm going to say about these crews is that I think the contrast between the true professionals and the thugs who are only one step removed from being criminals themselves was pretty brilliant. I wish they had done more in developing the characters. Mm-hmm. I thought the contrast between the different styles was very good. I think that looking at Santana's crew, they were thugs with some technology who had gotten complacent and relying on that type of technology to do a job, and they're picking on little girls while they rape them in their crew, in their ship, just contemptible characters who are not professional at all. And then you had the professionals who were really good, but they were cocky, They were cocky. They brought a 4-man crew for Riddick and thought they could get it done. And even with that, 2 of them died, so.
And you told him last movie, I find it insulting that you would bring out 4 people for me.
Yeah. So I'm just going to wrap it up there is that I thought that contrast was very interesting. I thought the whole color choice and the clothes choice was very interesting. Oh, and the last point I wanted to bring up, the color palette. This is where this movie really shows its budget. Unfortunately, this movie didn't have a big budget. Having done some computer graphics in my time, the easiest way to hide problems and not have to do lighting and other things is to do that kind of color palette and that kind of textures. You can't see the masks that are in there. You can't see the way that things are put together. It hides a whole lot of flaws, and it's very cheap. So as much as I like this movie, I got to keep it real. I got to be honest and tell you, when there are flaws, and that was a flaw. The movie has not aged well from a CGI perspective, and it didn't look particularly good when it came out. It was probably Chronicles of Riddick level CGI with less color and less dynamic action. So, and Chronicles of Riddick came out 9 years before this movie. So.
Okay, so Nemesis says that when in doubt, sepia. So here's when I want to go next, because you brought up some very interesting points that actually opened up a new little lane here. And here's the thing. I don't know if we've said it directly or hit the nail on the head, but you did with that last response, and because the problem was the care and the shaping of the supporting cast had little to no investment. They were cliche, they were caricatures. So it's a little bit beyond just being one-dimensional. It's more the caricature, the stereotype, the trope, the idea, we're going to throw this character in the mix. And when you do that, when you juxtapose that against the kind of movie we just saw, and against Pitch Black, where when you're having a transport ship and people are trying to go somewhere to find a better life for a bunch of different reasons, and you got an investor or you got a 1%er who's into, finer wine and has got to have his, his wine, and you've got miners and you've got mercenaries and you've got prisoners, all that. That's a way more interesting mix. But here, just about every cliche we could think of for this type of movie was given form in a character, and that automatically makes it bland. Then they married that to a bland background. So that's what I mean when I say there wasn't enough there to hook me from the beginning, because again, when you examine the characters, one of the things you said that's key is stuff happened because I think either the studio told Twohy to make it happen, or maybe he thought it should happen, but it was a very obvious, we're going to put this scene in the movie. And that's not the same as, does this make sense for the story? See what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so all the stuff you mentioned were more scenes like that. because her being a lesbian or her attraction or whatever, it's like, so we have a butch lesbian that's a merc and an assassin and a femme fatale, and Riddick is enough to make her do an Electra and say, well, I guess I don't want to do all that now because you're so hot. Really? You put that in Mean Girls, I'll buy that, but not here. And then, like we've already talked about, the relative intelligence or lack thereof for all the mercs. But then the one thing I was going to talk about was the monsters, but you said you can just throw them all out and it's the same movie. Because I was going to talk about like which monster was your favorite. But the difference here was that once you establish it's kind of a planet full of threats, then, they didn't escalate to the end. The scene that happens at the end that basically looks like Riddick is over should have happened 10 times before we get to the end. And it would have if you were really in that situation.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. This movie was dangerously close, if not in there, to being a string of cliches. Just one cliche after the other. And we wanted something better after what we've seen from the first two films. But Pitch Black, in all fairness, has the advantage of being our introduction to this world. So, of course, it's going to have a different level of excitement. What you're supposed to do is escalate on some level, which is why the Johns relationship is the most interesting relationship, because it is a form of escalation based on what we've seen. But almost nothing else was an escalation. It was a regurgitation. It was a repetition. It was a cliche nation, but that's pretty much it, I'm thinking. Okay, so on to the next. So here's the thing. Pretty much after we get through there, it feels like the Chronicles of Riddick escape sequence, except this time with the mud demons. Those were the water scorpions. It feels a little bit like that sequence that we already had. And then we get to the big climactic ending where I read one review, I think it was Ebert's review. Somebody's review said that Twohy didn't have the courage to do what logically should have been done, or screaming fanboys and studio executives wouldn't let it be done. But basically, we're saying that Riddick should have died.
That Johns would leave Riddick?
Yeah, and Riddick should have died because he was outnumbered, and, Johns wanted to come back and all different kind of stuff. So what do you think about that? Because when I saw it, the first time I saw it, I really did think Riddick was going to buy it. I really did think this is the end of the character. And then I was like, wait a minute, are they really going to do that? They're really going to kill this guy? And I was like, I don't know. But I really thought that logically, based on the setup, that was the way this was going to go. Because this was the only movie he didn't feel omnipotent in. This movie, he felt more human and more vulnerable than we've seen before, which I, in fact, did not like, but that's just me. So what do you think about that? Because, Nemesis said you should throw the monsters out. So let's talk about the monsters really quickly, and then we'll get to the should Riddick have died. Like I already told you, the dog is my favorite. The thing about these kinds of situations is that they're all carnivores with beaks and teeth and claws. And I'm like, everything on Earth, all those creatures aren't all like that. But when you get on these backwater sci-fi planets, all of a sudden they're all, I'm like, what y'all been living on before Riddick show up? That's what I want to see. In the Pitch Black movie, we saw the elephant skeleton. We saw the huge woolly mammoth skeleton. I was like, okay, I give you that, because there were other slower creatures that y'all could feed off of. But here, everybody got a claw, everybody got a tail, everybody got a big old beak, everybody got fangs. I'm like, what was y'all living off of? Y'all feeding off each other? Are y'all faster than each other? What about the water scorpions? Because they did the hypnotic snake thing, then they jump out at you. And I was like, okay. So that's another thing that pushed my brain out of it. But that's just me. So monsters first, then we'll get to should Riddick have died. So Nemesis, we already know. He said, throw the monsters out. We didn't need them. So, Steve, what do you think? Monsters.
Okay, on the monsters, I'll talk a little bit about the world building. I actually think that a lot of the world building in principle was not that bad. And I did look at some of the outtakes and some of the extra materials where they had basically said that it was basically a brown dwarf star with like a Jupiter-style moon. I do like the way that they use actual astronomy as kind of like the basis for these worlds. That stuff is interesting. It is a bit of a pitch blacky type world in the respect that it's a desert planet, and you have these monsters that come out under certain conditions. Yeah, okay. But I like that there was more of an ecology, an actual living ecology on this world. It wasn't just, okay, there's nothing there except for like, all these monsters and then like fireflies that were living in some of these corridors. There were actual animals and there was an ecosystem. Okay.
Well,
yeah.
One point real quick. It is implied that there are something that everybody's feeding on because Riddick and the Dingo Dango or Dingo Dongo or whatever the dog was called had that big old Fred Flintstone brontosaurus, bone stuff.
I just figured that was a big old shank off of one of the mud scorpions.
Oh, yeah, no, I figured that had to be some sort of herbivore or something, but
yeah, there probably are other kinds of creatures that exist. I mean, because it's like, what are the jackals feeding on, for example? I mean, there's definitely like an element there, and we know that there's water there, and I think that establishing, that there's water pockets, across this planet. And that there's regular rain cycles. That means that there has to be plants somewhere, things like this. So
plants.
Yeah, and so all of this was thought out, and so okay, that you have lesser strains of carnivores, and that the jackals would therefore feed on, and you see like conflicts, very Discovery Channel like conflicts between the jackals and the mud demons. Which I thought that was really, really interesting. Like that's kind of stuff you would actually see, from time to time. They would have encounters. And because the jackals, in addition to being reasonably strong, are also very fast.
Yes.
You definitely see how they're getting to the water because they're fast enough to go in, get the water. They can hunt because they have sense of smell. They have a very refined sense of smell. They would be able to go in and they would be able to find the things that they need. And then they would be able to get out there before the scorpions get them. Okay, so this is the one thing that Twohy does very well, and he still does that well here. I had no problems with that. The only problem that I mainly have with the monsters, is that it feels like, okay, basically they are the bioraptors, except that they come out in the middle of a rainstorm instead of coming out at night, but it happens to be basically night that they're coming out because pitch black, and we have to have Riddick using his super sight, so you have that element that's kind of forced, but I do like the way that they build in the world building, so at least it's not like something where it's a flat world. I think they put more effort into actually designing the ecology and the world than they did in designing any of the characters. So at least there's that. I'll give them that point. Did they need to be in the film? The only thing I will give them is that at least the encounter with the monsters is the catalyst for Riddick's test of John's. And that defines their relationship. But aside from that, yeah, I have to agree. They didn't need to be there at all. Maybe they could have developed that in a different way. Maybe Riddick and Johns kind of agreed, okay, we'll go get the nodes, and then they have to turn against Batista, because, that group is not going along with the program. There are different ways that they could maybe have done that. So, yeah, I see what you're saying in principle, but that really is like the only area where I would see where the monsters have any justification at all. And otherwise, it's just basically pitch black part 2 electric boogaloo.
I thought the eels in the acidic water were cool too.
Yeah, they were.
But I also liked how he injected himself with venom to build up an immunity. I actually wanted to see a little bit more of that.
I wish we'd seen more of that, and that seemed to be almost glossed over at one point.
Yes, it was. I was like, this is interesting.
I guess when I say the monsters could be gone, period, what I mean is the monsters as the main, the third act villain.
Yeah, that's what I figured you would say.
We didn't need them at all for the third act.
Yeah.
Cut them out of that. If you want to make them the backdrop that this story is taking place against as part of the world, that's great.
they could have just been a little hazard he used against the mercs.
Right. Yeah.
Well, when the writing is strong, I can stay in fan mode. When the writing messes with my brain and kicks me out of fan mode and my writer's hat come on, and so a different movie starts playing in my head, because I was like, my phrase is always putting the camera in the wrong place. I'm like, wait a minute. Do all Furyans have this ability? How do you know how much venom your system can tolerate before it overloads? How do you know how fast you build an immunity? How you know how to do all that? And how did you know that will work? And then that opens up the possibility for even more kinds of creatures.
No,
We don't want to fall in the Star Trek thing of,
Yeah. And I can buy him taking a certain amount himself, where I kind of was wondering, is like, okay, you gave the toxin to the dog and the dog survived it. How would you know? How do you not end up with a dead puppy?
I will say that I have seen this in real life. I have seen crazies do this in real life and inject rattlesnake venom at different doses to build up immunity to rattlesnake venom. So it's a real thing.
Are you talking about the Pentecostal church?
I was going to say, I've seen it in a religious context where they get the snakes and stick their hand in the snake and see how much time.
I'm talking about people who own like reptile farms or snake wranglers and stuff out here. That people that just
they can afford to make a mistake every now and again.
Yeah.
Well, them same people that dance and put their hand in the snake pit also drink strychnine. Oof. So they're dealing with snake poison and strychnine, but that's another conversation. Go ahead, Bracy. Monsters.
Yeah, it's funny you were mentioning that stuff about Riddick. I couldn't help but, as I'm watching that first part as well, I started wondering about other things. Okay, he's got a compound fracture. He resets his bone. But one of the things he does is the necromonger armor, because nothing about necromongers is pleasant. He screws the armor into his flesh. And I was like, yes. So I guess Furyans are immune to infection, among all these other things that they can just do that nobody else can do. And it's like you. I kind of was like, I want a little bit more of this. Like, let's get into this. Let's explore this. As for the monsters, I'm very much in Steve's camp on this. I thought the world building was pretty great, and that's one thing Twohy really excels at. I thought the world was fascinating. I was glad we actually got to spend some time with it. I appreciated the fact that the rain wasn't just convenient. Oh, we happen to be here on the one day that it monsoons every 22 years. Thank God they didn't do that, even though it got very pitch blacky at the end. But I really like the design of the creatures. Everything from the eels and the sulfuric pools to the vultures, to the jackal dingoes, to the mud scorpions. And I love this ecology that these things are so amphibious that they cannot risk drying out. They've always, if you can get away from the pool, you can get away. And I love the being somebody who designs creatures for fun. And I think about the biology of things a lot. I really like this kind of cool idea how they mixed an alligator with a cobra. I like the distracting scorpion tail, and it's like eyes and nose are up there. It's breathing through this. I'm thinking about how this whole system works, and then it's got the poisonous mouth down here. Like, hey, what's this hand doing? What's this hand? Ooh, I got you. I love that whole idea. The creatures in the world were built really well. And with Riddick seeing the monsoons and seeing the plains of foliage off ahead, you can probably figure out there probably are herbivores. And this kind of made it a world worth exploring. I kind of wish this had been Furia. This would have been really interesting to get more into. But I do like the fact that they brought in this whole cycle of Johns to sort of tie these two threads together. Now, the disappointing thing is, I agree with Nemesis. We did not need these monsters for the third act. I would have appreciated them more as being an environmental hazard to use against the mercs. Or, if I'm going to use them, I would not have done a countdown. I would not have done a countdown.
Oh, okay.
Pitch black. We know when we see the movies, like they figure it out. Oh, this is going to happen. There's going to be an eclipse. These things are photophobic. They're going to come out. We've got to get off this planet now. Riddick knows that the monsoons are coming. He warns everybody, the monsoons, you've got it until like rain starts falling. Then, time's up. We didn't need that. I didn't want that. It would have been so much better if we keep it to the human struggle. We're like maybe getting this 2 or 3-way battle, and it's looking pretty dire. Maybe it's going to be bad for Riddick. Maybe it's going to be bad for one of the other guys. And what changes the whole game in like maybe the last 10 minutes of the movie? It starts freaking raining. And we've had no indication that these things will come out in the rain. And all of a sudden they start crawling up through the mud, and it becomes a real oh shit moment for everybody in the cast. Now, oh, screw all this. We've all got to get out of here. I think that would have been an exciting way to end the film with like 10 or 15 minutes of a life and death race to the finish.
Okay.
Nice.
That actually makes sense. I guess because when you're talking about the overall world building, I guess it did have some layers and dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
But again, see, this movie it's what Steve said at the beginning. It's Chronicles of Riddick: The Apology.
Yeah.
It has a bunch of things in it that don't necessarily need to be in it, that are shoehorned in for excitement or for whatever reason, but it doesn't seem to necessarily flow logically in terms of the story. And like I said, if we're going to dive more into the, he said last movie, I had mercs on my tail. I'll always have mercs on my tail. It would have been the motion, the running that would have done it for me. Because this was a lot of stationary kind of stuff, and I'm healing and I'm hurting. I got to get my edge back because they kicked me out of the necromongers, because of whatever, because I wouldn't swear to their faith. And then there's a deleted scene where, if you watch the director's cut, he actually goes back to Helion Prime. And so that's what I mean when I say, it didn't fully get away from Chronicles of Riddick. It tried, and it tried to distract us with all this other stuff. But that world was just too big and too thick and too full and too rich for it not to be lingering over the things that was happening in this film, I think. Go ahead, Nim.
I was going to say that I think the thing for me also is that, yes, I agree, necromongers and all that deserves to go. We deserve to see more of that and everything. But I think the really other interesting aspect that we've been introduced to is mercs, especially after Dark Fury. I saw Dark Fury before I saw Riddick. And in Dark Fury, we are introduced to the concept that there are mercs, and then there are mercs. So, some mercs are professionals, some mercs are thugs, some mercs are cannon fodder. Some mercs are people that are just kept on ice until some queen bitch needs to throw them out there to just be shot and killed. There are all different types of mercs. And it's like, who signs up for this? Who decides to do this job? Who goes it alone as an entrepreneur versus being on one of these big merc ships that we see in Dark Fury? And I know we're going to cover that movie, but there are these big merc ships where there are thousands of mercs kept on ice. Who the hell signs up for that?
Twohy actually talks a little bit about that in one of the outtakes, and it's the idea that they don't have a law enforcement situation that can cover the breadth of the galaxy. So who's doing all the law enforcement work? Yeah. It's all the mercs.
Yeah, but it's like, what kind of person is signing up to be put on ice? Or,
exactly.
Crack ice in time of bullets flying at my face.
Like if it's the only way to see the universe, that might be the only way. It says like, to take a little line from Highline, it's not the same thing, but like service guarantees citizenship, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Do a little time and get out there. And if the audience out there hasn't seen the sci-fi special introducing Pitch Black and have played the video games, you get into a lot more merc lore there as well. And I'm with David. Like this is a really interesting aspect to explore as well. There's the whole damn universe is so rich.
Yes.
I mean, even and to be honest with you, I hope they don't do this, because I think DT's point is right on. It's like, this was our interlude. Now we need to get down to business.
True.
But how much would you like to see a slam movie? Just a whole slam movie, an escape from a slam. A escape from Butcher's Bay type movie.
We could do this with side characters.
Yeah.
Well, see, now, if we're going to do that, that's what other media platforms are for. Mm-hmm. So we need some more video games. We need some more comic books and graphic novels. We need some more short animated films. We need like I want you to imagine an
Or some
animatrix.
novels.
An
I was
animatrix.
thinking like
for
an
the
entire
Riddick.
animated series, like a
Well,
full-on show. I think you could
well,
do a lot with Riddick in that.
Oh.
In that.
I would say right now, Dark Horse or Image or Boom, you need to contact David Twohy and get the rights to do comic books for this world.
Yes.
Because if there's a
My
world
vote is Dark Horse.
yeah, if there is a world that is screaming for a comic book series or two,
I could think of 4 writers who would agree to do it.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, all right. So that leads me to the last point I wanted to make, but you guys can throw out if there's some extra stuff you want to talk about, because again, I was mainly disconnected. So what I'm going to say now is going to sound funny, but maybe not in light of everything else I've said. I have to say, when we get to the end of the film, it didn't feel like Riddick anymore to me. I could be wrong in that feeling, but it didn't feel like him to me. And so I felt like I was about to witness the death of a different character that was a spinoff of a character I once thought I knew, and didn't really think I would miss him that much if they croaked, to be honest. So I don't know if that's a fair assessment, but it's honestly how I felt. And I was like, well, okay. Because I'm asking myself in the moment, how would I feel if he really does bite it? And I'm like, I don't know. I guess it could be the end. You know, there's so much more stuff in this world to explore. But it started to feel, and once again, I could be wrong, it started to feel, by the time I finished this film, even the first time I watched it, there was something tickling my brain that was saying, they really don't know what to do with this guy. So much more can be done with this guy, and so much more can be done with this world, but they made it smaller than they needed to. And okay, so the movie I rewrote in my head would have been a combination mystery thriller, merc chasing action adventure with Papa John's not being revealed as a protagonist and as an antagonist until the end. So all of a sudden there was tech Riddick hadn't seen before, and maybe he had to flee to worlds he hadn't been to before. Then I can buy the responses of not knowing what's going on, and he keeps running into places he can't fully get out of, or maybe he gets hurt because somebody has weapons, or somebody's been studying him like Bane studied Batman, and finally figured out a way to really hurt him or put him down. Then at the end, it's revealed that Papa John's is that antagonist. That's kind of the movie I would have bought instead of this one. And I would have cared about if Riddick had died more than I did at the end of this one. That's just me. So let me hear your thoughts about that. I'll start with Bracey.
Wow, that's a lot to think about there. I hadn't really come at it from that perspective. I know I did feel for the first time since the very first movie, because in Chronicles I was pretty sure he was going to make it through. Like he was just too awesome to kill off in that movie.
Yes.
I would have bought him dying in the first movie, actually. That could have been his arc. That could have been his big change. You know, he actually sacrificed himself as opposed to Fry.
That was in fact, the original plan.
I realize that, but he's good choice. So this is so much more interesting character. Not that Fry wasn't interesting. Hey, maybe there's a chance to see her in the Underverse. Everybody dies after all. But I did feel like he was actually in danger of dying, and I was very conflicted watching that when I first went to see it in theaters, because the whole time I was like, well, this can't be the end. And it's just being a fan, I want a satisfying ending to the story, whether it ends good for the character or bad for the character. And you have expanded my world too much. We've got too much to do with Furya. We've got too much to do with the Necromongers. He's been having all these freaky visions from the Furyan priestess. You know, we can't end it here. And I was like, oh man, don't kill him. Don't kill him. No, do not kill him. And so, even if it didn't necessarily work for you, DT, I'm glad that isn't where it happened. I have to agree, things definitely got a little muddled with this film. I don't think it's that the writers didn't know what to do with the character anymore. I feel more like there was a need between Twohy and Diesel to probably like, we got to get Riddick back out there. We got to remind people that Riddick's out there, and hopefully we can do well this time and get another movie, the movie we want to make in the future. But we've got to go ahead and get him out there, because in the studio says, like, well, does anybody really care about that anymore? So you need some level of exposure over a number of years, and I just feel like in the end they did what they thought was the best they could with the money they were given and whatever studio direction they probably had to acquiesce to get the film made. So not as satisfying as it could have been. It was still an enjoyable romp, but I look forward to these guys being able to show us real Richard B. Riddick again in the future.
Well, I will quote the line from The Mummy, or maybe The Mummy Returns: "Death is just the beginning."
Yeah.
Because we've all mentioned Underverse.
Mm-hmm.
So if he does die, that does not necessarily have to be the end of the character.
That's true. I hadn't considered that either.
There's a whole nother storyline and a whole nother story world that could justifiably see him fighting or chasing, or we find out. Because what I would have done, especially from a religious angle, what I would do is write Underverse as nothing like what they thought. Almost Wizard of Oz style. So you got the big head and he's talking and there are explosions, the great and powerful Oz, the great Lord Marshal, but then you get down there in it and you're like, holy cow, it's a prison camp.
Holy. That would be so suitable.
Yeah, then, like, holy cow, nobody down here is in power except maybe...
Oh, well, check it out. Since we've already got like a pseudo-Egyptian iconography, we do a Moses, and Riddick has to lead the people out of bondage.
Something like that. Or yeah, that's another great angle. He gets mistaken again for a savior or a deliverer, and that's not what he's trying to do. He's trying to run through it, and there's writings on the wall that predicted him being there, and everybody keeps saying, like they did with Superman and Kandor and all these different things, that you're the one and you're supposed to bring us out. And Riddick's like, here I am again in a role I didn't sign up for, but it's like, it's none of what people thought, and then he realizes that it's something that they sold them. They sold them because Steve was talking about how do you maintain power, different kind of stuff, because the Necromongers definitely, their approach was like the Borg, except they asked politely, will you let us assimilate you or we'll kill you? Not,
makes me think of Dune again, because there's this whole thing about the prophecy of the Furyan who would take down the Lord Marshal. But when you think about Dune, all of this stuff is set up by the Bene Gesserit, and yet it comes to be. So is it prophecy or is it just the long game?
There's another twist I would have added in was, number one, I would have made the creatures from Pitch Black, the Bioraptors, I would have made Underverse their origin place. And I would have been able to make them be able to talk.
That's interesting.
So when they come out here, they get mute. They can't talk because there's something about the upperverse atmosphere that makes them lose some abilities. But then we get to Underverse, and one of them turn around and says, Riddick, we've been waiting on you. Holy cow, that would be the opening scene. Everybody would freak out. Okay, go ahead, Steve. Ending.
Yeah, I would not have been satisfied with Riddick dying here. I just feel like, as much as I may think that, yeah, he kind of lost a couple of steps, for whatever reason, this was not the natural ending point. Riddick is a man of destiny. He has been prophesized to kill the Marshal and take over the take over the Necromongers. Why? What was his purpose to be there? What is he destined to do, sitting atop the throne? Okay, so we never got to see that. Plus, there is an unanswered grievance, which is Vaco set him up. We want to see Riddick get out of this situation and make sure that Vaco pays for his betrayal. We want to see that happen. We start to see it a little bit in the epilogue in the unrated director's cut version. where we see that guy that Newt, I think, or whatever his name was. We finally get to see him go under, but we don't see what happened to Vaco. Okay,
he's already in the Underverse.
Yeah, right. He ends up at the end, right? So so we need to see that, and without that conclusion, without the seeing Fury again, without seeing what Riddick was meant to do as a being of destiny, I feel like killing him would basically cheat the audience of a resolution. So here I'm saying, okay, for the purposes of this little microcosm of a story, him dying, okay, maybe. But in the larger mythos, because again, we can't separate ourselves from the larger mythos because it is too epic, it is too grand, it is too vast, and it is too interesting. You can't separate yourself from that. As much as this movie tries, it does this. So here I am saying, in the grander macro view of the Riddick verse, him dying here would be a cheat. You're not really seeing where this mythos is going, and there's no proper resolution. Because he doesn't do what he is destined to do. He doesn't do what the story expects him to do, which is, when you are wronged in such a way, the story is about, getting past that point, building yourself back up, getting off of the planet, and then going and find Vaco and sticking a knife in his eye. Okay. You're not going to get resolution until that happens, because this is what we are expected to believe as an audience. And because we're not being given that as an audience, any kind of ending that ends up with Riddick ending up dead on this planet is incomplete, and the story is not what it should be. So I have to say that this is again where the patchwork decision to make this Pitch Black 2 really works against it, because you can't even kill him properly, because here you are thinking, okay, what about the Necromongers? It's just in any way that you ended up, it's insufficient, and because of that, the only thing that this movie can be is a filler episode in an otherwise grand saga.
Ouch.
Well. Yeah. Okay. Again, it just feels like what Lucas did with Empire, because it wasn't mainly him.
Right.
But Star Wars was about the conflict. Empire made it be about the Skywalkers. But something about that became so compelling, it changed everything after that.
Yeah, it would be like doing Return of the Jedi and only doing Jabba, and then Luke dying like right at the end, and then you never face Vader or the Emperor. That's what it would be like.
Oh, you mean like The Last Jedi? But I digress. Okay, okay, go ahead.
All right. Before I get to the ending real quick, on the epilogue, I am not entirely convinced that Vaco sold Riddick out. In fact, sometimes I play around with the idea that Vaco told him the truth because Vaco is Furyan. Chew on that one for a second.
They did kind of hint at the idea that maybe Vaco told the truth, but was it the truth from a certain point of view?
Yeah.
And where he's lying with the truth?
We don't know.
We don't know that, yeah.
Yeah, and I want to know that. That said, it's going to be no surprise to everybody. I love this ending. I absolutely love it. And here's why. First of all, to Ebert's review. Ebert said that the director didn't have the guts to take on the fans or whatever else. Well, it depends on what you want to do with John's. All of this depends on John's. If you want Papa John's to be kind of guy where Little John's is the apple that doesn't fall too far from the tree, then go ahead and kill Riddick. That's fine, because John sells him out. But if you want John's to be a redeeming character to complete an arc, and I'm going to talk about that arc in a second, you have the ending happen just the way it was. So let's wind all the way back to the beginning of the movie. Riddick takes a fall because Riddick's become civilized. I love this storyline. I love the storyline because it's true. It happens, especially to people who are, I mean, this is going to sound overblown, but I'm going to use the word anyway, warriors. People, once upon a time, I was a hard man that did hard things. Then I got married, and I lost a little bit of that edge. Then I had a son. I lost a little bit more of that edge. Then I had 2 daughters that I started doing tea time with and everything else and playing dolls and dress up. I lost even more of that edge.
Mhm.
Did that make me less of a person? Did that make me weaker? No. But did I still have the same edge I had before when I was a lone wolf and had nobody? Hell no. Hell no. Completely different person. That happens to every man, no matter what profession you're in. You change as you get older. You change as people become dependent on you. The lone wolf 19-year-old has a completely different edge than the 50-year-old man who has matured into something different. Why do I say that? Well, Riddick had a little bit of this, a little taste of this from the Necromongers. Is Riddick ever going to be the guy who's sitting at home smoking a pipe with his feet up and his slippers with his little girls playing dress up? No. But even that little bit of change is going to take enough off the edge of Riddick that I think that it's believable that he could let his guard down or something like that. So let's rewind even further back. Pitch Black. Fry dies. And Riddick says, not for me, not for me. He doesn't want to be tied to anybody. He doesn't want that little bit of edge, that little bit of humanity in his soul, that connection that can weaken the lone wolf warrior. He's changed. Fry's sacrifice changed him. Jack's death changed him. The little girl in Chronicles of Riddick changed him. He's a different man, whether he wants to admit it or not. Now let's fast forward all the way to the end. Riddick, at the beginning of Pitch Black, he leaves Johns. He goes alone, and he gets back to the ship with one of those notes. He doesn't even pick Johns up when Johns crashes his bike because Batista knocked him off. He says, screw that guy. One less guy I got to deal with, you know? Riddick has a heart, whether he wants to admit it or not. Riddick has a soul. Riddick is connected to humanity. Well, in doing that, in partnering with Johns, he has made himself vulnerable. And in the fight, when he's got Johns back, he gets stabbed. And then Johns leaves him. So now that leaves you with the question that I would give to Ebert. What message do you want to send here? Do you want to send a message that connection that he had, that reconnection with humanity is a weakness, and that the apple didn't fall far from the tree, that Johns and Little Johns are the same person, and that Rigg's going to die because of his weakness in connecting with people? Are you going to show that his faith, his ability to connect with humanity was rewarded, that it paid off, that Johns came back for him? That's a pretty powerful story right there. Yeah. That's a pretty powerful piece of storytelling. And I think it is really great in looking at the evolution of this character and paying off the idea that, yeah, Riddick lost a little something in that edge, that ultimate warrior type thing, mystique that he had. He may have lost a little something. But you know what? He's gained something as well. He's gained the loyalty of 3 people that he never would have had before. I mean, as much as we're making fun of it, and I don't believe that Dahl wants him balls deep in her at all. I don't think that makes any sense. But I think Dahl respects him now. I think Johns might come to his aid if push came to shove. And I think that Luna kid would help him out. So he's got the respect of those 3 people. He's becoming a part of a group of people, whether he wants to or not. And is he ever going to be a leader of men, a person who is out there putting himself out there for hundreds of people and commanding loyalty and respect from all these people? No, that's not him. But the people he does connect with, he's forming strong connections based on his actions and how he's interacting with them. So he's growing as a character. He's evolving before our eyes. And that's one of the reasons that I love this movie and why, it's just, I think that if they had done more of a human drama, this whole movie, the movie would have been better for it. So I love the movie, but I'll admit that I think it has some flaws, but I think it was a really cool look at Riddick and how he grew.
I think everything involving Riddick and Johns is pretty much the best part of the movie for me. So, yeah.
Okay. I could definitely follow all that. But once again, my question or my pushback on it is, is that kind of arc realizing the full potential of the character? And maybe that's more writer than fan, but it's like, I can relate to all those vibes because everything you said is true. everything you said is true about how, I mean, Rocky even says it. When I first got in the ring, I didn't care if I got busted up. It was just me. Now there's me, there's you, there's the kid. I don't want to lose what we got. And he had to psych himself up every time he went in the ring because he had more on the line. And that does happen to you as a man, as a warrior, as a fighter. All of that's very, very true. I just don't know if I don't know if that's the particular arc I would have given this character, even though it is true to life. But maybe it goes back to what we said before. I want to see more of you in your heyday before we get to that version of you. So, like, we went crazy when we finally saw Luke, fully trained, fully a master Jedi, fully just doing almost a mirror image of the scene that his father did in Rogue One. When we see really the Luke we've been waiting umpteen and Google years to see. So whether we end up with old man Luke or not, we want to see more of that before we get there. So that's kind of my reaction to what you're saying. I can follow that, and that makes a lot of sense. And I'm also trying to think of any 50-year-old single men that I know, if they're talking about Edge, if they're talking about all the stuff that they talked about when they were young men.
I would say that most men that are still at the edge they were when they were young men are most 50-year-olds. There aren't a lot of 50-year-olds that survive to be 50 if they've still got the edge they had when they were teenagers,
The kind of chances you take, kind of catch up with you.
Yeah.
Throwing your body out there at 19 is different than throwing it out there at 49. It's a little bit different conversation.
Yeah.
So
the kind of stupidity you did when you were a teenager, if you're still doing those kind of stupid things when you're 49, 50 years old, good luck with that.
Those guys go from being cool to ending up being pretty insufferable.
Yeah. And eventually they end up in a wheelchair.
Bus at age of 49 to 50, yeah. True.
Yeah.
So
I was jumping off bridges at 19,
So yeah, so I'm saying if we're going to go that way, I'm still going back to Steve's point that this was a reshuffle. This was not the original plan, and this was where we need to put this together because Chronicles didn't do what we thought. I think that's 100% straight down the middle, spot on. So, but I'm saying if we're going to go that way, then I want to see the Luke at the end of Mandalorian version of Riddick more before we get to, I've lived my life, I've done my shot, I'm not that guy anymore. I want to see more of that guy before you decide not to be him anymore.
It would be an interesting way to give us that. And if David Twohy is watching this, thank you for watching. And please take the suggestion. When Riddick goes into the Underverse, give us a montage flashback scene and have us see scenes from Pitch Black for Chronicles of Riddick, but also shoot some new footage from way back in the day of him just slaughtering people, which led to his reputation.
This is why I'm in favor of an animated series, because Vin Diesel's a decent voice actor. He could absolutely kill it as Riddick in voice, and there's no reason why you can't show that stuff in an animated form.
Yeah,
that's why I think that Logan went over so well as a film, because we've had plenty of Wolverine being Wolverine, so that makes it a little bit more interesting to see him actually come to his end or unend, because that doesn't happen in the comics. But that's why I think that worked.
But if Underverse truly is transitioning to the, for better or worse, the afterlife, the idea of your life flashing before your eyes as you're going through the portal to the Underverse makes a whole lot of sense to me. So,
it might be if my theory holds true that this it's all tied into black holes. Underverse might not even be death as we know it. Yeah. So there's a whole thing there, and I don't expect to see Riddick as the leader of a people per se, but man, he'd make one heck of a war chief for a brief period.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff he could do. Yeah,
and war chief of the Furians.
I'll just
like this uprising and like smash the necromongers or whatever the next threat's going to be.
Well, I'll just throw this out before we wrap up, and that is that. And listen to you guys talk, especially Nemesis, just last part right there. This to me is how I feel when I think about Locutus. Locutus came and went so fast And they teased in Picard that he might come back, but he didn't. Everything we've seen after Locutus was a Borg recognizing Picard, and maybe Picard switching into Locutus mode or saying he was or whatever. But we never really got to see Locutus in his heyday, even if that was just 6 days or 2 weeks, however long it was actually Locutus and the Battle of Wolf 359. And we see Cisco and the impact on Cisco. But I'm saying there has to be some moments in there where somebody in Starfleet says, you mean to say the captain of the flagship has been assimilated by the Borg? Really? Now, I know they did some stuff like that in the books, but I'm talking about visually seeing it in a form. And all of a sudden, see, because what does that do? See, that's why Nick Fury formed the Avengers. Because Asgard showed us what it can do. It got involved on Earth, and all of a sudden we're like, holy cow, this is what the story guy is bringing. This is what we're dealing with. So Fury had a response. And then also that's what Redford used with Hydra to justify the helicarriers. I forgot what we call them, the Project Insight. So I'm saying, just like somebody at Starfleet would have said, wait just a minute. Protocols would have shifted. They probably would have approved the phase cloak, emergency powers like with Palpatine. If the captain of the flagship, everything he knows, they know. That's what I mean. We never got the full realization of that idea. That's what this feels like to me with Riddick. And that if we're gonna bring him to that kind of conclusion, we, what are the Furians? Is the stuff that he can do? Is the stuff that all Furians can do? Because we've seen, different versions of them. And what kind of planet is it really? And like you said, where did he get that reputation of being that killer? We need to see that. We need to see that Wolverine Berserker rage or something. So I'm saying I just need more before the end. I just need more before you're 50 and you're a nice guy now. And, I'm not the dude I used to be. And I'm okay with that. I don't know. It was just too much of a character shift and a time jump. It feels like the decades of his life were compressed to get to this film. See what I mean? So, all right. So lots of good ideas. And as usual, we switch back and forth between fan hats and writer hats. And also, I want to echo Steve's point. You must watch the director's cut. You must see the deleted scenes. You must, and like Bracy always says, you must consume as much extra or supplemental or tangential material as you can, because it expands the world even more. And it puts a different feel on the movie. And actually, the one scene at the end that's cut out when he goes back to Helion Prime, it's kind of an acknowledgement that we can't totally get away from the Necromonger. It's too big of an idea, too big of a story world. We can't just ignore that. So I underscore those 2 points wholeheartedly, that you should consume as much of that extra material as possible. And remember, we didn't have any problem doing that with Star Wars. We ate up every book. I remember when Splinter of the Mind's Eye came out. I remember when the Zom books first came out. I'm like, that kept the franchise alive. I don't care what anybody says.
I still want a movie of Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
So that's right. But see, the point I'm making is that we have a world that rich in this series. We have a world where we can do all that side stuff. There could be like a Mandalorian in the Riddick world. That's what I'm saying. That's how deep this world is. And so we are chomping at the bit. We are hungry. We want more in all directions. Okay? And that's how as a writer, you've scored big. The thing is, do you know how to capitalize on that? Do you know how to give your audience more of what they want? Do you have yourself attuned to the pulse on the ground enough to know that? And that's what I would be hoping would happen, because Alien still hasn't gotten it right either. We're still reeling over Colonial Marines. We're still like, really, y'all? Really? So, they got it a little bit right in isolation, but that world is huge. That world is huge. It's bigger than Ripley. We love Ripley, but it's bigger than her. This world now is bigger than Riddick, but we want both. We want more adventures of Riddick in his prime and the Necromongers and everything else that comes along with it. So we should all create worlds like that. We're doing the best we can. So we're going to call it right there. I want to thank each one of my co-hosts for incredible discussion as well. just stuff that just challenges how we see things and challenges us as writers. So thank you so much, Nemesis.
Oh yeah, this is a great discussion. I loved every second of it, and yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Give us more. Give us more video games. Give us comic books, movies, books. Give me a video game called the Furyan campaign about the fall of Furya, or a book or a comic book, something. Just bring it on. Like you said, I think this is a gold mine, and I am really surprised that no one has tapped it.
Oh man. The fall of Furya. Oh man. What if it's like fascism? Oh man. Okay. Sorry, you got the brain to cooking. Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah, this has been a really fascinating discussion, and it's because this world is so fascinating, because the character of Riddick is so fascinating. All the world building that Twohy did is extraordinary. I mean, even in the movies we don't like as much, there's things that are brilliant in them, and we want to see more of them. And this is why we need to see a Riddick expanded universe. We need to see, all these other media. I want to see that animated series. I mean, because there's just so much potential in it, and we just want to see it grow the way that this deserves, and which up till this point hasn't had the opportunity to. And I keep hoping that these Riddick 4 rumors are really happening. That this is what Vin Diesel's gonna do after Fast 9. I keep hoping that Riddick will get the resolution he deserves at the least, because this franchise is so big, and it is bigger than anything really that we talked about, or any of the people involved in it. There is just so much there, and we want to see it get the closure that it needs.
What if the Furyans were like the ancient Egyptians and they tried to do the necromonger thing first?
What if they created the necromongers?
Reavers.
I've actually got an idea of what they might be like.
And they tried it, and then it didn't work, and the necromongers picked it up and did it better. And that's why they're running all over the galaxy.
What if the necromongers were a slave state that were, they're undead slaves or something like that?
Yeah.
That they conquered. There's so many things you could do.
So many things. Go ahead, Bracy.
Yeah, like everybody else, I of course want to see more. I want to see an expanded universe. I think, and this is just my own suspicion, I think we haven't seen all this because I think David Twohy wants to be very personally involved with everything that happens with this series. And maybe Vin Diesel also has some personal equity in it as well. And maybe this is why it hasn't been released to other authors to play with. So I can't confirm this because I haven't looked at how the games were developed. But I can't help but think that he was very directly involved in that. It feels like the Pitch Black movies. It feels like the Riddick movies. It has his stamp all over it. It's just like when you see a movie that's not J.J. Abrams, but it's J.J. Abrams produced by certain guys. You feel their stamp. You feel a Spielberg movie, even if he's not the one actually directing it. So I think that might be the issue here. As far as what Furya might have been, I would like to point everybody to an old sci-fi series called Andromeda, starring Kevin Sorbo. And they had a race of humans called the Nietzscheans. And they lived in pride. And their whole ideal was survival of the fittest. And if you were the biggest, the baddest, the strongest, you were the leader. Go back and watch that series, and I'm thinking that's what the structure of Furya might have been like. And they ended up, in their world, dominating the galaxy because they were just the baddest. They're like Klingons on steroids in their own way.
Like
evolved to be superhuman predators.
Like the Krogan in Mass Effect.
Yeah, I mean, because they look like humans. They just have like extra spines in their elbows. But other than that, they're thinking back on it, they remind me of Furyans because they're just so much better than the average humanoid.
I just looked up Escape from Butcher Bay. David Twohy wasn't a writer, but he was involved, so he was a resource for the writers on that.
Okay.
All right.
As long as he's got that Kevin Feige kind of role, it'll be great.
We're going to leave it there. Our next and final review will be some of the animated stuff. We're probably going to throw in, I'm going to definitely let Bracy throw in some stuff about the games too. So we're going to talk about the extra content that does already exist in this world and what that looks like. And so we want to thank everybody for joining us. We'll be here same time next week to finish this review of the Riddick series. So this will probably be posting on the weekend. So I hope you have a really good holiday. Hope you're really safe and enjoying the 4th of July. And let's just be grateful that we're still in a place and a time where we can create and enjoy all this good content, because we know that's not true worldwide. So let's think about what we have to be grateful for this weekend. And we have 2 ex-military on our panel and people that have put their lives on the line to give us just the opportunity to have that kind of life. All right. That's it for this episode. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Sloppy Spoilers.